Oh yeah, let's get negative.
I don't know why I started it like that. Hey guys, it's Jack, and recently I asked about the best episode of Drag Race, and now we're flipping it and let's talk about some of the worst episodes of the franchise. I honestly think there's more variation in how people argue what the worst episode is because sometimes challenges just don't work out, people act really weird, or the judging is just bad, while in best, you can just kind of see the quality from the start. So I feel like this list is going to be all over the place when it comes to the factors that make the episode bad, so you're in for a wild ride. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to start with the regular seasons, then do All-Stars, and then some international seasons. Let's start off with a pretty popular choice. The Evil Twins Challenge from Season 10 is just the weirdest thing on Earth. This challenge and episode overall just feels like a really last-minute addition, as if they ran out of a challenge or ran out of time or budget to do something, and instead they were like, okay, we just need to do something really basic. So what did they come up with? Exploiting mental health? They were basically tasked to have a good and bad version of themselves, with the bad self kind of highlighting every single insecurity that they had. Just talking about it is so weird. RuPaul comes in the workroom and talks about inner saboteurs, basically with Cameron and Miss Cracker mostly, the queens who are showcased to have the worst anxiety from the show. Two queens who are plagued with insecurities are then tasked to point out these insecurities in the challenge, and then are put into the bottom because of it. A lot of the queens' runways ended up looking similar too, because they just reused a runway that was chopped early on. Not to mention that Asia got buried in the edit this episode right before the finale, which is weird because normally they try to edit everyone into the top. Overall, it just felt like a very mean-spirited challenge that was trying to induce stress right before the finale, and it worked really well on the girls. Seasons 4 and 6's makeovers, dear lord, I hate these episodes. So take the concept of superfans or queer youth who love the show, and then flip that into people who have no idea what's going on and also just being very toxically masculine. The fact that there's almost a fight in season 4 because one of the makeover guys was just not a good person, and the fact that one of the men in the season 6 makeover had to go on as a punishment from his girlfriend, it was just a recipe for disaster. I like people who go on the show who actually know what's going on, rather than people who have no idea what's going on or are doing this as a punishment. Season 4 saw the return of Kenya Michaels for a single episode, and then she got eliminated again for some reason. Why was she brought back? And the makeovers in season 4 were, oh my god, they were a little gutted. The silver lining is that we got one of the best lip syncs from Latrice, while in season 6, the lip sync wasn't as good. It wasn't a bad lip sync, it just didn't hit what it needed to hit. At least the makeovers were a lot better this season, except for Jocelyn, who was screwed over a little bit by production. If you didn't know, after TKB was eliminated, production took away a lot of the darker shades of foundation, so that's why Jocelyn's partner looked a little lighter. There's a lot of little issues with these episodes, but of course the worst is the behavior of these men. At least we had a buffer between them with season 5 and Dave. Next up, let's talk about the world's worst from season 12. I talked in the last video about how Espana's episode 2 kept up the energy from the premiere, while sometimes other seasons kind of struggled to do that. And the world's worst is the best example. You come off 2 of the best premieres of the show into a very misguided and weird improv episode. I can and probably will do a full video on acting challenges and improv challenges, but especially early improv and acting challenges, they are never ever good. It's so easy to fall into the background, the parts can be so small, but at the least it could maybe be funny or entertaining. The world's worst wasn't. There was 3 Girls, 1 Brain, which was just the same joke over again, and Sherry just won the challenge from it. The premise of the fruit group set Dahlia up to fail. The Girl Scouts were okay, and the old women were something. That was definitely something. No performance was terrible, but no performance was good either. I just really cannot remember a lot that happened. Sometimes though there's a bad challenge, but the runway and lip sync save it. The runway this episode was really great, while the lip sync, it was really bad. It just feels like a very nothing episode, something that can happen on Drag Race from time to time, especially in the early parts of the season. It does start the feud between Britta and Aiden, instigated by Sherry, but of course I really don't like this storyline, so it actually takes points away. Overall, it's just a really awkward episode that can be skipped pretty easily. Up next, I'll quickly mention the season 13 premiere. I've done a full video on this, so go check that out if you haven't already. This episode has such a mean-spirited and awful tone, and I'm so glad that they learned from their mistakes. This episode is just honestly a lose-lose situation for everyone. For the queens to come in and then immediately get eliminated, they feel terrible and we don't like watching that, and also we don't know who they are yet, so there's absolutely no stakes. The pacing of the episode is really weird with the constant start and stop, introduction of the queens, and then going out, lip sync. It just doesn't really flow well at all. It was already a tough year when they filmed this. They were going into their favorite show and then they get eliminated on the first day. It just doesn't really feel good and it doesn't really play well to the audience. But actually, we're not done with season 13 because I'm going to pick one more episode. There's a couple that can go here, but I'm going to go with the Discomentary for some interesting reasons. Obviously, I think the judging was pretty bad. I think Mick got saved for absolutely no reason. And at the same time, they forced Tamisha in the bottom and the reasoning just doesn't sit right with me. We all saw the challenge, we saw that Mick dropped a lot of steps, but then they gave that same critique to Tamisha, and it just frustrates me because it was obvious they were trying to edit around Mick's faults, and they were totally okay just showing everything that Tamisha did wrong. Again, I think this episode did really have a great runway, and Mick did rock that runway, but then I just think that they forced the Tamisha and Candy lip sync so hard and so fast for no reason. So Tamisha and Candy got in a fight in the previous episode of Untucked, and then immediately in the next week, they're already lip syncing, and then Tamisha is sent home. I just think it kills a storyline that could have been built up over the course of the season. Obviously, you have two very interesting personalities that are going head to head, but you just kill it off right away, and that honestly has an effect over the course of the season. At the end of the day, I don't hate the challenge. I think the lip sync is pretty good, but I think it just shows so much potential wasted in this single episode. The issues of season 13 often come down to the fact that we can see the producer meddling really easily, and here I feel like they could have meddled it in a better way, but it just didn't really serve the season at all this episode. Now you may be expecting me to put Shakespeare on here, but honestly, I thought it over and I don't think it deserves to be here. Yes, the challenge was hard to watch, it was cringy, another acting challenge that has a lot of problems, but the way they told the story this episode was really great TV. If you want an episode where a lot of the cast flops and it makes bad TV, let's look at Snatch Game from season 14. To me, the biggest issue is that there's no way to make this episode look good. There's no good way to foreshadow the events that are to come later in the episode, so you're just kind of sitting through the motions of Snatch Game being like, oh, what character are you doing? Oh, this is gonna be so fun. And then everyone flops and you're like, oh my god, we just wasted a whole episode. It's a pretty crazy watch the first time through, but afterwards, you're never gonna go back and watch it outside of maybe just watching Deja's performance. Like with season 13's premiere, I have a full video on this, so if you want to go check that out, you should check it out. It just serves as a spontaneous build-up for the next week's episode. Very smart on their part, but just not a good episode looking back. And one final one from the regular seasons, let's talk about an episode from season 11. There's a couple. I could talk about the makeover or the magic challenge because the judging is just so blatantly bad, but for some reason, I just can't bring myself to do it over the monster ball. To me, the monster ball just sums up everything I dislike about the modern ball on Drag Race. It was one of the earliest balls we've ever had. There were a lot of looks to get through, and I don't think a lot of them hit the mark. None of them were outright bad. I just walked away with very little thoughts about each of them. I loved Evie's dinosaur one. Akira's looks were pretty cool. Other than that, the troll doll look, that's what I remember. I think one of the big reasons why I don't like this episode is because the storytelling just sets up Brooklyn's win, but it doesn't make it very satisfying. We're supposed to really care about Brooklyn being panicked and being like, oh my god, how am I gonna get this done? And then she gets it done and she wins, but it just wasn't really presented that well. And the thing is, I feel like we knew she was gonna pull it off because she already won one design challenge this season, and then we have another one, and it's like, okay, she's probably gonna do good regardless. If anything, the storytelling of this episode should have been set up for Plastique to win. There were a lot of little seeds that were being planted, but in the end, they gave the win to Brooke because she was panicked and then she got it together at the end. I don't really like it as much. Let's switch over to some All-Stars episodes. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that I can go for with All-Stars 1, so I'm gonna try and avoid it. I think the Gaffin is my least favorite episode from that season though. The last 3 episodes of All-Stars 3 are pretty bad, with Dela going home, no stakes in the next episode, and then of course the jury in the final episode. But if we truly want to talk about a no stakes episode that was just kind of filler to get to the end, let's talk about Sex in the Kitty Girl from All-Stars 4. It was clear that if Latrice didn't get into the top, she would be sent home right away. Outside of the Life's Not Fair moment, the Queens played the season pretty cleanly, so we knew exactly what was going to happen if Latrice wasn't in the top, and yeah, it happened. Again, this acting challenge was written so lopsidedly for only 2 rules to be really funny, and of course those 2 rules were in the top. And to say the word funny, I don't know if that's exactly the right word to say. It dragged on for so long, I feel like a lot of the girls didn't have funny lines or they just didn't land them properly. It's honestly a little reminiscent of the sketch that we just got on the most recent episode of All Stars, but I think that episode was a little funnier. This one, it just makes no sense, and then we get to the end with a clown part. What was going on? This of course was right after Manila's elimination, and a lot of people were checking out of the season at this point, so then when they got this episode right after, they were like, okay guys, let's just be done with the season. The least I could say is that the runway was killer. I think all of the All-Stars 4 runways were so good, and I think Latrice's gown was amazing. But 95% of the episode was predictable, not funny, and was just a buffer right before the finale. Moving on to All-Stars 5, I'm gonna go with the episode Get a Room. They tried to play up the potential that Shea was going to go home, but at the end of the day, no one was going to send Shea home right after she just won last week. India won the first week, so of course Mariah was the only viable option. For this type of twist with all the queens voting, I think All-Stars 6 just did a much better job at storytelling. All-Stars 5, it was just really clear every single time who was gonna go home. I also just think the challenge itself wasn't that good. You can argue why a club kind of challenge would work in All-Stars 4, but here, what drag queen is gonna build a hotel or motel? Wait, fuck. And then we get to the actual judging of the episode saying that Blair and Mayhem had the best room, but they didn't win. The win goes to Jujubee because she had the best performance in a design challenge? I think Juju should have won Snatch Game, but the whole time this episode they were pushing the fact that she's never won a challenge, and then she wins this challenge, but I just don't think it's the most warranted. She had a great performance, but again, this is a design challenge, and she didn't have the best runway by far. So many wins in All-Stars 5 feel like they were switched around a little bit, like Juju should have won this challenge and Shea should have won this one, but instead Shea won this one and Juju won this one. Like, it doesn't really make that much sense. And to me, I think it's just the worst here. They also had the whole thing where Blair and Mayhem had the top room, but Juju had the top performance, so she won the challenge. I just don't think it makes sense. If Juju had the top room as well and then won because her performance was the best, that would make sense. Every single episode of All-Stars 5 felt like a means to the end to get the top 3 that they wanted. They got that top 3, but I think the most egregious failure was this episode. But we did get this amazing moment from Alexis.
The most exotic fruit we can find.
The hell just
Bananas.
happened?
The last All-Stars episode is not from 6 or 7, it is from UK versus the World. Let's talk about the finale. I could put the talent show here for some interesting judging, but I think most of the talents were really fun. I could put Snatch Game here, but I think that Snatch Game was really great. Panjani's elimination just hurt. I could put the West End Wendy's here because Jimbo's elimination hurt, but I think that performance was decent as well. The episode that makes the most sense to me is the finale because it just feels so lackluster. I think all of the lip syncs were just okay at best, and then we had like a 10-minute conversation about why each of these queens should be there. It was really sweet, but I think it dragged a little bit. The most entertaining part was the reunion with the girls, but it just felt a little tacked on and a little mean-spirited. I think everyone was just a little bitter because of their elimination. The actual lip syncs of the episode only took up the last fourth of the episode. There was just a lot of space that they had to fill, and I just don't think they did a great job at that. UK versus the World honestly just feels like a fever dream at this point. So now let's go international. Let's start off with Drag Race UK, of course, Drag Lexa. It was honestly clear that no one really had a vision for what they were doing, and it showed in the final product. People were kind of getting on Rue for saying that she's seen it all before, but I honestly do get the critique. I feel like a lot of it was being played safe. Though I do have to say that I don't think Drag Lexa as a concept gives a ton for the queens to work with, so I don't blame them for performing that poorly. There was no elevation to the jokes being told. At most, it was the rule of 3, but even then, it wasn't that strong. Do I think River should have gotten the win? Yes and no. I still don't think the team was that strong, but I mean, she looked gorgeous on that runway. The placement of this episode also doesn't help the awful pacing of UK Series 3. There was a double save right before this, then no win, then a double Shantae, and then a top 2 episode. It was all insane at the time, and even now thinking back, it's pretty crazy. At most for storyline, it adds and finishes Scarlett and Charity's little feud, but even then that wasn't really played up that much. Originally, I was also going to do one from Canada, but I honestly couldn't pick an episode that I truly disliked that much. Instead, let's get into the big beast, Down Under. You can honestly choose just about any single episode from Down Under, and it would probably work as one of the worst episodes. I'm sorry, no hate to the girls, I just did not like the season, and most people didn't either. I think it's a toss-up between 2 episodes, episode 5 where they address the Scarlett situation, and episode 6, the talent show. Honestly, I can't decide between the two which one's worse, so I'm just gonna put both of them on the list. Narratively, I think episode 5 works really well. Elektra finally gets a win, but of course, that's not the big issue with this episode. The issues come in with Scarlett getting a slap on the wrist for doing very racist things in her past. It's both addressed really weirdly and then not handled well right after. There's no Untucked for this episode, and I think we know why. I think there was a big discussion about it, and maybe people got mad at each other. Everyone's under NDAs, so we don't know quite yet. Art, please tell me, Art. My big thing is that we had a very woke and very smart person and etc talking about it, and immediately as they called Scarlett out, they were then eliminated. Like, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna do this? For a show that handles a lot of topics with grace and respect, it feels like they were trying to set up a winner here, or at least put out the fires of their future winner. It just honestly wasn't a very good look, but they put so many eggs into Scarlett's basket that I think they were just trying to go for broke. On a morality standpoint, I think episode 5 is the worst, but for a TV media standpoint, I think episode 6 sucks so much. From start to finish, there was complete meddling the whole time. Kita and Electra both gave amazing performances, but they were thrown into the bottom for a storyline, and then they saved a couple performances that I don't think should have been saved. Again, I have a full video that dives into this episode and the season as a whole and how it could have been set up for Electra to win, but then they didn't go through with it, and it just leaves the whole season very lopsided. It truly just makes me angry looking back on the episode and thinking about Down Under in general, so I'm just gonna call it here. Like with the best episodes, there's a lot of different things that can make a worst episode. From social issues to bad judging to bad performances and challenges, there's a lot that can go on to make you think, wow, this is really bad. At the end of the day, I think that 90% of Drag Race episodes have a very, very high quality to them, and when it's at its best, there's nothing like it on TV. And to be honest, when it's at its worst, it's at such a unique worst to anything else that's on TV, I honestly can't be that mad. Thank you guys for watching. I have some scripts at work, but I've just kind of been going through the ringer with life right now, so everything's kind of slowing down a little bit, but I promise I'm going to get some videos out to you soon. I truly appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for 40K. I'll see you soon with another video.